Rise of the Ronin is a Team Ninja developed RPG that released on the 22nd of March 2024 as a PlayStation 5 exclusive. I'm generally a fan of the games that Team Ninja make, and I bought Rise of the Ronin with expectations that it would largely be based on similar elements. That expectation was proven correct, as there is some familiarity in the mechanics and systems at play here if you've played Nioh or the more recent, Wo-Long Fallen Dynasty. The biggest change is that Rise of the Ronin is an open world title, leaving behind the mission-based structure of the previous games in favour of an open world. The primary setting of this piece is Japan between 1858 and 1868, as the country deals with Western influences, both good and bad. The game follows a nameless protagonist's involvement in conflicts between the pro and anti-shogunate factions, with foreign powers at work behind the scenes. The game begins by giving you your origin story, which is short, effective, and to the point. You belong to a clan that trains warriors to fight in pairs. These are called Blade Twins, and we are put in front of a fairly strong character creator and asked to design a pair. I left both characters as their default appearance and chose to begin my adventure, but you can customize these should you wish to. This is also where you can pick your starting stat spread, with the game hinting at which weapons go well with certain choices and playstyles. In truth, your weapon choices aren't that important at this point, but your blade origin is. There's one favouring each of the game's primary stats, along with two others. Beginner exists for those who can't make up their mind, while Unsharpened exists only for those craving the challenge. Unlike other games that use similar systems, there doesn't appear to be any long-term benefit for choosing the weakest starting class. There's a brief introduction, and then you have a mission with your twin which goes awry, you end up separated from them, and then a short period later you kind of stumble out into the open world in search of your missing partner. This is where the game gives you your freedom, and it's here that you run into other figures whose names ring true within Japanese history. Ryoma Sakamoto is one of the more prominent, and he's the catalyst for your character becoming involved in the events that follow. The focus switches quickly from find my twin to either supporting or putting down the rebellion. This forces other characters to step to the fore of the story. But perhaps the most striking part of all this is it feels as though your twin is very underutilized in the narrative. They flit in and out in a manner that is perhaps intended to make them mysterious and distant, but it really just makes them quite difficult to believe as a character. The overall plot suffers from the same ups and downs, but mostly flounders around introducing characters in large numbers and not focusing on making the events driven by the player. For example, in Chapter 2 you are tasked with assassinating an official during a fireworks display. Regardless of how much you want to support the faction that asked you to do this, your hand is forced by the narrative, and instead you let this person live. It feels like your choices don't matter at all until Chapter 3, where you make your big choice and then have to deal with the decision. Even the game's strongest narrative parts, which mostly lie in side quests, particularly those around the search for a cure, have some irregular pacing. These could be said to be a victim of the world's open nature, which means you can take on certain quests before certain others. While the story is erratic at best, with most scenarios just contrived to be an excuse for a bloodbath, this is delivered in a manner that elevates it above previous Team Ninja games. This is primarily because the characters do linger longer in narrative relevance. Even Nioh 2, which I hold in high regard, had a problem with throwing out the name of a historical figure, barely introducing them, and then quickly shuttling them out of the plot. This is handled much better here, and while there are a lot of characters the game treats that way, introducing them once and casting them aside, there are more core reoccurring members who are treated like the stars of this show, and hang around long enough to deserve that mantle. No one character really stands out though, and that's not helped by the spoken dialogue on the English track. It's just very unimpressive.
My name is Taka Murayama. I'm a geisha in the Pleasure District.
I can't believe you let their boss live.
The Japanese audio with subtitles would be my recommendation for anybody who wants to play this, as it better conveys the shifting tone for all the primary characters. It's a shame, because the majority of the story is character driven. Each of these characters you meet serves the utility of providing quests, or acting as deployable allies in combat. As well as the overworld, which is open, there are missions that take on a more instant structure, and see yourself and your allies deployed to take care of an objective. These feel much more like the traditional level-based approach of prior titles, and are replayable once you reach the second chapter. In this open world, you have the usual open world activities. For Rise of the Ronin, these include defeating bandits and fugitives, finding cats, taking pictures, and praying at shrines. There are some other objectives too, but nothing feels unique or special. You are, however, given good tools to move around the world, with a horse and glider being given to you very early on, and both allow you to get from map marker to map marker quickly. The traversal is solid, and fast travel is unlocked without having to jump through hoops. The game doesn't just force one massive world onto you either. As you progress, you move between 3 maps, each of which have their own selection of activities. For both the good and the bad reasons, these feel generic, like a shopping list you follow as you walk around a store. How you feel about them will greatly depend on how many other open world games you play, and whether or not you've reached that critical level of fatigue for the open world genre. This brings us quite nicely onto progression mechanics, as a lot of these are tied to these open world objectives. Charm, strength, dexterity, and intellect are the 4 main stats you need to worry about. The game has others too, but these affect the scaling on your gear and weapons and are the best indicator of your character's playstyle and power. As such, there are 4 skill trees, 1 for each stat, and as you level up or complete objectives, you gain skill points. If you put enough of these into a tree, you gain a point in that stat. You can also acquire rare items that increase these too, and these are mostly found from challenges in the world, or if you purchase them with one of the game's currencies. These are specific to a certain stat, so you can't do all the activities and choose to boost a single one, like strength for example. Collecting cats will only ever give you scrolls that award charm points, while the photography challenges will only ever give you intellect points. That's a very basic overview of a much more complicated system, which includes weapon proficiency, titles, loot, gear modifiers, along with skills from the skill system. I'll say quickly that I think this system in its entirety is good, and it works with the loot system, which is based on an item rarity mechanic with some RNG involved to help push your character's power forward. The loot system is very similar to the one that was in Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, however the gear sets don't feel quite as powerful here. There are still multiple weapons to choose from, along with 4 gear pieces and up to 4 accessories. This is a tried and true system, and while I would have liked more control over what stats I can move onto what items, at least prior to the endgame, the overall result is positive, and it gives you another avenue to seek out power. I genuinely believe you need that power too, as the game's primary focus is on highly technical combat that really benefits from a focused build and stats. Put as simply as I can, combat revolves around your primary weapon. For the purpose of my initial playthrough, I focused on polearms and oxtail blades. You have regular attacks, skills, ranged weapons, and counter stance, which is a counter deflect move. Your character has HP and ki, with the latter going down when you perform any action or take damage. If you run out of ki, you can't move or defend yourself, and are susceptible to big hits. The same is true of your foes though too, so breaking ki is a viable method of combat. Think of this like posture damage in other games. You use counter stance to deflect blows and panic your opponent, which creates an opening for you to attack. Each weapon has different attack and counter timings, and bigger weapons are usually slower to swing, but deal more damage. All of the above is pretty standard, but where the technicality comes in is with stances. Each weapon has multiple stances or forms which affect attack and swing direction, counter behavior, and the skills that you have. These styles fall into a rock, paper, scissors triangle, where one has the advantage over another. You can equip 3 of these at any time and switch between them in combat. The game even gives you a visual indicator as to whether or not you have the advantage in your current stance, with combat generally easier against those you have the advantage against. Each style has natural scaling, and more abilities are learned as you improve your capabilities in each style. This is usually done by defeating someone who uses that style, or raising your bond level with an ally that uses that form or style. That's a lot to absorb, and the different stances are a large part of why I use the word technical. This combat system is not for everybody, but it's the primary reason why I like Team Ninja games. For most people who bought this title, this aspect is the big sell, as the rest of the game is just fine. It's this combat, in particular the complexity of it, that sets this game apart. And while I do believe that Wolong Fallen Dynasty had harder encounters, I like this game's combat more. I was clearing missions in this game, but I certainly didn't feel good at fighting for the first 20 hours, and it took a lot of experimenting and some serious time spent in the game's training dojos to get to the point where I felt serviceable at using the counterstance mechanic. If I had to pick the one centerpiece of this game's combat, it would be just that. That 20 hours is just under half of my total time with the game, and while I love learning new systems, mechanics, and challenging my brain to absorb all the information being thrown at me, that's certainly not something everybody feels or is driven by. If you are looking for an escapist power fantasy and don't want to put in a fair bit of work beforehand, I would steer clear of this one. The biggest objective letdown in the combat is enemy design. Rise of the Ronin is tied to a level of realism. Everything you fight in-game is either an animal or a human that is, within reason, true to life. This means that you're fighting enemies that can use the same stance as you do, but it greatly limits how they behave and attack you. There's no demonic magic or crushing monstrosities to contend with here. It's just British soldier this, Japanese bandit that. There are variations, of course, but it makes a lot of the game feel very grounded, and strips away a lot of the unique boss encounters Team Ninja have done well previously. To compensate, a lot of the enemies here are incredibly aggressive, which either makes them easy targets to counterstance, or results in players who are struggling with the timing to be pressured relentlessly. This is likely not helped by the addition of stealth as a primary tool of gameplay. One of the pros and cons of an open world is that you can move around more and catch enemies unaware for assassinations. Aside from a few particular units, that's a one-shot kill. It means you don't have to be as good at this combat as you had to be in Wolong and Neo, and while that's better for some, it might be the opposite for others. This is going to come down largely to personal preference, because the stance system and the overall progression system in the game is excellent. From a player perspective, you have a great deal of choice and flexibility in how your Ronin plays. I just couldn't help but feel there was a level of flatness in the enemy design that hampered the experience. I did run into a few technical problems that started to grate on the game too, but let's get the overview out of the way first. The game has 3 graphical modes, one that focuses on FPS and gives you what feels like a solid 60 with the rare drop. This was my preferred one throughout due to the fast-paced action combat. The graphical priority setting is a very noticeable change, and choppier compared to the FPS mode. The detail is significantly better, specifically shadow effects and finer character modelling. There's also a ray tracing mode in the game, which really pushes some of the game's cutscenes to a respectable current gen standard. The game looks like a good PS4 game on the performance mode. Unless you're entirely focusing on the narrative and have no interest in the combat, I would recommend putting the game in this mode and not changing it. To add a technical gripe, I did experience a strange reoccurring issue where the image on screen would freeze, but I could hear the game continue in the background. This would linger on screen for a few seconds, and then the game would slowly stutter itself back to real time. This happened both while recording and not, and I haven't been able to discern a pattern for triggering this. This did happen more frequently towards the end of the game, but never caused a full console crash. It was just very annoying. Most of the other issues I had with the game were quite minor, or could be fixed by tweaking settings. I found the ranged weapons aim assist to be aggressively sticky, and switching this to manual aiming solved that problem. There's also an entire page of accessibility options and some other settings that can make combat easier. I do appreciate that when you finish certain objectives here, the game automatically rounds up loot for you, and once you've finished the game, you can set automatic sell or disassembly of items and equipment, and you also unlock a further stage of gear. Really, the endgame is just the midnight difficulty, which allows the acquisition of masterwork items, and this functions like a soft New Game Plus, and at least provides some replayability. In conclusion, Rise of the Ronin suffers from an erratic narrative and generic open world mechanics that is heavily propped up by a technical combat system. The game's progression is very good, but does ask the player to progress through an open world collectathon to achieve those gains. I think that even at my most generous, I can recommend this to fewer people than Neo 2, but it will resonate more strongly with the right people than Wo Long Fallen Dynasty did. This is not a game for the masses, but it has the potential to be a bit of a cult classic, with strong combat and a uniquely bloodthirsty take on an era of change in Japanese history, helping it to stay afloat amid the other mechanics, which are just open world mediocrity.